Hello, and welcome to this episode on Trustworthy AI, de-risk business adoption of AI. This episode, we're going to focus on the value and challenges of AI in manufacturing. I'm here talking to Namrita Mahindro, very special guest, who is immersed in the field of manufacturing. She is the Chief Data and Information Officer for Birla Chemicals, and interestingly, also extremely passionate, like I am, on developing sustainable and responsible AI. Namrita is talking on the subject. She has also has a podcast. It's called AI Talks, and as well is teaching at the University of Oxford on responsible AI. Welcome, Namrita. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Delighted to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, so let's dig right into it. I'd like to start off with what do you see as the value of AI for manufacturing?
So, I think I've been using AI in the manufacturing space for almost a decade now. And it's interesting how the space has evolved. But my view is that, as we look at manufacturing, I think the impact in manufacturing can be created predominantly when you're looking at two or three very critical, KPIs. So typically the first thing that you want to look at is what is the quality of the output, you know, irrespective of whatever you're manufacturing. What is the reliability of the operations, that you have? And the third one is really, what is the operational excellence or the productivity that you are being able to drive. Now, this typically came in as part of the conventional, view of looking at Industry 4.0. And I think over the last year or two, that landscape has started changing because while there was a huge drive on efficiency and AI did brilliantly in terms of adding value over there, whether it was from a reliability lens and looking at predictive analytics in terms of bringing down the number of breakdowns that you may have in a manufacturing environment, or whether it was from a quality inspection point of view where you could have traceability and look at the genealogy and go back and figure out on which production line, on which spot was there opposition, was there the issue, and sort that out. I think that focus has shifted and the need to bring back humans in the center of the manufacturing sort of enterprise or the manufacturing plants has become really important again. I think the second aspect, apart from the people factor, is the sustainability factor. And I think particularly given that I work in the chemical sector, it becomes even more important because it's seen as an industry which is, not necessarily environmentally friendly. And there's a lot of work that we've been doing to really foster green chemistry. So, given that context, I think when you start looking at AI can play a huge role on both these fronts. So, starting with sustainability, it can play a huge role in terms of looking at how do you look at better energy consumption, how do you look at optimization of energy. In fact, it is one of the largest variable costs in most of our manufacturing units.
Mhm.
And given that, if I can optimize that cost, if I can do a hybrid of green energy and grid energy, I think those are areas where AI can play an extremely important role in terms of predicting, optimizing, and ensuring the right mix of energy to happen, as an example of being sustainable. As an example of putting humans at front and center, it's really about from a health and safety point of view. And ergonomics have been, an area that traditionally were always ignored, particularly in a country like India, where you had, a lot of human labor available. But I think again, over the last decade, this landscape has hugely changed. And today we have humans and, cobots working together on assembly lines, uh, doing the tough jobs where, it may not be suitable for a human being to necessarily do that job. Uh, I think the last point that I want to make over here, is around the VUCA world that we are living in. And I know as much as we all keep talking about the volatility and the uncertainty, the reality is that, AI can play a huge role in terms of helping us become more resilient, becoming more anti fragile, um, by allowing us to focus on how do we anticipate certain scenarios, how do we simulate certain scenarios, how do we forecast things very differently. uh, you know, uh, Gone are the days when you used Excel based forecasting. Today, within our enterprise, we use very sophisticated AI ML based um, platforms, which help us do a lot of integrated business planning. And these are critical in terms of making sure that, our plants, our manufacturing operations are running extremely, well, and are preparing us for potential eventualities that, or scenarios that we may not encounter on a day-to-day basis. So, if I was to summarize, I think the role that AI plays is really in terms of bringing humans front and center, augmenting their capabilities, uh, taking care of health and safety, which is paramount, looking at sustainability and ensuring that manufacturing is done in a manner which is um, green, which is circular, which allows for a lot of recyclability, and ensuring that it is resilient to the changes that we are seeing, the disruptions that we are seeing on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, those are very, very good points. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So let's kind of go into detail on one or two of them. Well, firstly, I'd like to start out that this is almost like a paradox, right? Where because manufacturing has been using AI for so long that now what you're bringing out is almost the going from automation to the humanity aspect of it, and how it's helping humans and how it is bringing them front and center, as opposed to where a lot of industries may be going from humans doing tasks to automation. So that's an interesting paradox. So thank you for highlighting that, Namrita. Um, the one that, and I agree that, with what you're saying about efficiency. Earlier, the focus was on efficiency, on predictive analytics, as opposed to what are the tasks that would be better served and done by humanity and humans. So it's really highlighting the need for human in the loop and human on the scene when it comes to automation to get the value.
Uh, yeah.
Um, one question I had was regarding you mentioned the focus shift from or ergonomics, to automation, for example, how it's able to actually make lives much safer when it comes to manufacturing, right? When using AI and robots. Can you talk a little bit about how do you make that safer when you have cobots um, coexisting, robots and humans?
Right. So when I talk about, making it safer, let's look at it through two or three different lenses. I'll start with the ergonomic lens that I, talked about. In my previous life, when I worked in the automotive industry, there was a lot of fine adjustments which needed to be done across different car parts. So, for example, a gear and a shaft which needed to be, um, fitted in together. And that was a task which was done by human beings 1600 times in one shift. And you can imagine to try and do it with precision and get it first time right was not an easy task.
Mm.
Now, that meant that people were bending over craning their necks, injuring their backs at times in doing something like that. You bring in a cobot and you give that particular task to the cobot, and you suddenly have the human being freed up to do something else, which may be value adding in a different way. So, from a human safety point of view, it definitely, sort of was a use case that we worked on and that brought about, from a health perspective, a lot of value. If I was to look at it from a more recent example, from a safety perspective, we've been using, a combination of VR and AI for our safety training. And the primary reason is that, when you're looking at people working at heights, and this is very common across any form of manufacturing, because you have accidents which happen rarely, but the impact is, lethal. So a lot of workers, especially contractual workers, and typically most industries have a very high attrition rate of contractual workers. So you may have it anywhere between 30 to 40% across a lot of industries. Now, given that, they don't necessarily pay the requisite attention when that training is being imparted. And the training which was being given conventionally was classroom training. So it's very difficult to fathom how, one misstep, one, not one harness not being put in place could actually result in a fall. What we've done is, in my current organization, we actually got a VR simulation of working at heights. We got a whole lot of different, you know, um, sensory uh, elements also added to it. So, what's the wind chill factor when you're at that height?
Wow.
Right? What is the kind of, if you're doing it in the middle of the afternoon, what does the heat of the sun look like and what impact will it have on you? Or the fact that, there are people who have vertigo, but they don't even know about it, and they're volunteered for this kind of a job. So the minute they put on the VR set and they go through this experience, we've had so many people realize that they actually have a vertigo problem. And so then we have, we've not put their lives at risk at all. Now, the second thing that we've done in this case is not only are we providing them guided sort of training, but then we have an unguided module in which they go back and repeat all the steps for that safety exercise that they need to carry out. And through AI, we are actually monitoring where are they having the misses. So till they don't perfect that, whether it is 2 tries or 3 tries or it's the first time right situation, they don't actually go up onto a height where they need to work. So given that, again, AI and VR together have come together in this case, and we've actually eliminated the potential of safety incidents happening significantly because of giving this pre-training where we can actually check the efficacy of the training, take remedial actions on a completely personalized basis, and therefore transform the health and safety perspective of each individual worker who's with us on the shop floor. So that's sort of another example. I can give more, but I think I'll just pause unless you'd like me to share another one.
Yes, I would like to get more examples, but this is very fascinating. And I know when you're talking about AR and VR, you're talking about augmented reality and virtual reality for the listeners. So another form of using AI for actually delivering that experience and simulation of what the on the job experience would be like. That is a very, very great example. I like the fact that you're talking about how to use this for making the job more safe, more secure. Um,
Yeah.
a quick question here, and I do want to hear another example because that is very helpful. Um, when it comes to the adoption, right? When the workers are putting on those AR, VR headsets and accessories, what is the reaction? Is it something that they are that you have to overcome initially, or what is the overall perception and reaction to that?
Pamela, I'm so glad you asked that question because I have to now share with you a story that actually left me surprised. So, we have one of our plants in Verawal, which is in a state called Gujarat in India. And it's a very, very small tier 3 town, right? Now, when we took our VR experiences for safety training to this town, I thought there will be huge resistance in terms of adoption. And so I sent the teams actually 2 or 3 days before the launch so that, the teams who were going to work with this safety equipment could just become a little bit more comfortable with the equipment before we did the formal launch. When I landed a day before the launch and I spoke with the team, to my utter surprise, I found that everybody was so comfortable with it. And when I checked out, what was the reason and how did that happen? Because it is a
Right.
tough change management approach. What I was told was that these kids, and a lot of them are very young actually, go off to the gaming arcades to a close by city, and they are doing a lot of these VR experiences in those gaming arcades. So, A, the equipment is not foreign to them. B, the experiences is something that, they have done in different contexts, not in the safety context, but in different contexts. So, I found that very fascinating. So, we have surprises like that come by our way from time to time, but you're right. When you look at the slightly more seasoned workers who are maybe middle aged, they do struggle a little bit initially. But I think when you invest that time, when they see the benefit, a couple of them realize that they had vertigo, which they had no clue about. Things like that alter their perspectives
Okay.
about the benefit of using something like this. So it doesn't come as naturally to them as the millennials, but it is something that they are open to experimenting with. Now, it's been an evolutionary journey for us. We tried something like this 2 or 3 years back, and there was huge resistance. But I think post the pandemic, everybody, or during the pandemic, everybody went into this unfreeze mode of, learning new ways of doing things and embracing technology very differently. I think that's also played a role in terms of changing people's perspective about technology, realizing that there is some benefit to it. So I think we're seeing that shift happen. It's slow. And then we have surprises in terms of not surprises, but digital natives who are taking it to it far more, beautifully than I guess some of the digital immigrants.
Right. Well, and it speaks well of your leadership as well, right? To anticipate and having your team there before, right? We're having sending them in advance so that giving them some more time to get familiarized, and I think that's very important as well. Very.
Absolutely, and you're so right because adoption is, um, I guess, the biggest component in the success story of any change management that you do. And to make that happen, is an arduous task at times. Though, of course, as I said, this time we were pleasantly surprised.
Yes, and like I said, I think it's really good leadership on your part too. Um, okay, great. Now I would love to hear the other example you were going to give us.
Sure. So I think when we look at it from a safety perspective, and when you're looking at um, the whole manufacturing space, I think the other thing that we have realized is there is a lot of work that our teams do, again, going back into the chemical sector, which they do in what we call confined spaces, or they may have to go up, climb up chimneys and clean those. So I'm giving two ends of the spectrum. And when you have use cases like these, or when you have this kind of work, you know, uh, you have on the one end drones that you can use actually to look at how dirty your chimney is and to go in and see if it needs cleaning. And then you use the same technology, the different form factors in terms of robotic arms to actually go in and clean a chimney, or into confined spaces where a human being would have to wear a complete, because it's a confined space with lots of chemicals. So a human being would actually have to go in a life suit. They would have to have an oxygen cylinder, and the maximum time that they can spend at a stretch is about 10 minutes. And we've replaced that in some places with technology wherein you can actually have a robotic arm that can go in and do the cleanup for that confined space. So, again, from a safety point of view, this is huge in terms of a shift about human safety per se.
Yes, thank you. That's a great example. A quick question there. Would that using technology instead of a human actually add to the cost for the company, or would it be level, you know, the same level?
You're right. It oftentimes is more expensive. But I think prioritizing human lives over the cost then is an ethos that we follow in the safety space. So that's one area where we would typically, and again, organizations globally I've seen would embrace technology if it is a matter of health and safety.
Wow.
So that's where we make exception.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So, as that's great. I think you've been answering a lot of the points that come that I wanted to cover around what is responsible AI in manufacturing, right? So you kind of already given me two great examples of not only what responsible AI can do and what it means in the manufacturing space, but it speaks really well of your company as well to kind of position that so that you're already ahead of the game in terms of how it can improve human life. It can improve these safety conditions. One thing I do want to ask about, though, is have you had any, or are you preventing against security? In terms of how the robots are adopting security by design, or security principles so that they don't hurt human life.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And right now, because a lot of these are cobots rather than robots per se, so it is something which is on our agenda. When we're looking at our responsible AI frameworks, we are baking it in, but is it live on the shop floor? The answer is no. But as we intensify, our usage of robots, full-blown robots on the shop floor, I see that changing. And you're absolutely right. The safety of human beings from robots is there in our thinking, is there in our design, but it's not on the shop floor as yet. And that's something which is work in progress, if I may call it that.
Okay. All right. So I think we've covered of the areas that I wanted to cover, most of them, right? Which is what is the value of AI for manufacturing, how you're harnessing that, what are the
Mhm.
responsible elements that go within AI, and of course, your approach to it, right? Uh,
Right.
love to hear if you have any concluding comments or takeaways.
I think the way I look at it is that, when one is looking at responsible AI, since we were, talking on that topic, there are a lot of areas that we are trying to still figure out. And I think those are critical, whether it's from a manufacturing lens or otherwise. So I think when we, one is the physical harm that you talked about, but also when you start talking about, having humans and cobots or robots start working together, particularly robots start working together, it does mean that you're replacing humans with machines. That does have potential challenges. And again, this is not something that we're doing, but we're thinking about right now in terms of, what is the mental and emotional impact. the performance levels, and that we've anyway seen even with cobots, of a cobot versus a human being. And therefore, how would you judge them in terms of their performance, in terms of their output, in terms of the kind of impact that they can create? And I think a lot of work still needs to go into these areas when you're looking at human well-being and safety, not just from a physical point of view, but also from a mental and emotional point of view, also from a perspective of, how would you look at the scenario from a future of work perspective. So I think that's one element that comes to mind. I think the other aspect is, you know while we are, and again, um we're very aware of the fact that, what is getting a cobot or a robot onto the shop floor going to do in terms of human autonomy. Because when something goes wrong, the responsibility and the accountability still lies with the human being. But, are you doing that at the cost of taking away their autonomy by, introducing a lot of machines? So, therefore, when you're looking at AI or other technologies, really figuring out, how do you create that balance is, I guess, the second thing which uh, one needs to give careful consideration to before, deciding to introduce a robot or, any other form of technology on the shop floor. Um, and the third and the last one that I would want to kind of, talk about is really around the transparency and explainability. And I guess now, again, with the generative AI, space, while AI, we were still struggling to see how we get out of the black boxes and, make it far more explainable. I think with LLMs, I think that same problem is resurfacing about the black box. And I think, again, that's something that we are very aware of. And therefore, how do we need to think about responsible AI in that context is something else which is on our radar. So I think these were a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share in terms of, areas that we are looking out at, that we still have work to do on in terms of, moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we'll definitely have to do a follow up, Namrita, on generative AI in manufacturing. Love to talk to you about, go do a deeper dive into that because there is a lot to cover there. And I would like to go into more details on that. So, thank you for joining me. And I am really happy that we were able to talk across thousands of miles here in India, in USA. And it was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
Likewise, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much, Pamela, for having me on your
Absolutely.
podcast.
Thank you.